Okay, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. We have a really weird technical situation on our hands right now, which is why we're so late getting started. But I'm really glad we're all here. The problem we're having is that our guest author, Megan here, yay Megan, she can't hear anything we say. Just fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to text her our questions, and she's going to read them and then answer them, and we should be able to hear her on the video. So we're just going to give this a shot and see how it works. We've got a new discussant here with us today, Patsy, and I'm really happy to see that she's been able to make it. So Megan O'Keefe is the author of the Scorched Continent trilogy, and she's very cool. And
Hello,
we had her on
Megan O'Keefe. I'm
Yep.
joining you today to talk about, I believe, my Scorched Continent trilogy, which the third book just came out.
Fantastic. So let's see. One of the questions that I have, let's start with this. I'd like to know what it was like deepening the world for the second and third book. I'm typing that in now.
Okay, so deepening the world for the second and third book was really, it was a fun experience, because oftentimes, you know, you write a lot of short stories or single novels, and there's a lot of world building that goes into setting up even the shortest of stories. So you often don't get to dive into all of that extra detail, things like that. And writing sequels and filling out, you know, the arc of a whole trilogy allows you to really bring a lot of what you did for the underlying groundwork of that story to the surface. And that was a lot of fun. And even then, of course, I still didn't manage to fit all the world building in there. That would be ridiculous. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So what were the main places you had to go deepen things?
So with my second book, a lot of it took place in a prison in the world. So I had to think a lot about, well, basically when you have people who detract from a society, what do you do with them? And for most cultures, that's either you try to rehabilitate them in some way, or you outcast them from the culture, or you punish them in some manner. And for this particular, the culture I was working with in the Scorched Continent, it was a little bit of all three, which is what most complex systems end up being anyway. And so, that they both wanted to give some of their prisoners a chance to reform. They wanted to punish some of the truly outcast, exile, essentially. That's mostly for smaller cultures, would be the third one. More tribal type situations where exile is almost certain death in this case. But so my culture wanted to try to rehabilitate some of them. They wanted to punish some of the worst offenders. And they also, because they were at war and they were in the middle of a very large war, they wanted to keep some of the middle ground cloistered, essentially, so that they could maybe use them as, unfortunately, cannon fodder in the future if that came to pass. So I had a lot of fun looking at actual structures for prisons, the different ways of building them, of housing these people. How do you keep the worst offenders separated from the mild offenders? How do you sort out that population, and what is it actually like living in that scenario?
That sounds cool. Where did you do your research?
Well, you know, you start with the internet, right? And then I drilled down, and for a long time, I was certain that I was going to do. I discovered historically there's a lot of prison ships in the world. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these, but they started fairly early on, honestly, but they were really popular during, yes, Australia has prison ships, absolutely. And they became popular during the Civil War here in America, and the French Revolution actually had some, and the First World War, they were used quite a bit. And also, we still have one today here in the United States. It's a barge in New York City that is still active. Yeah, I looked it up.
So it
It's
functions as
fairly
a
creepy
prison?
looking, actually. It's like, what is it called? Something correctional facility, and it's a barge in the middle of the water by New York City, and it is a prison. Yeah, we
That's
still use it.
amazing.
As of 2014, it was named the largest prison barge in the world. So we got that going for us. And I thought for a while this was the perfect solution to my world because I have airships and the magic, controls the airships, and that would be a great way to sort of, yeah, maybe that's part of the punishment if you get seasick on the prison ship. I don't think your roommate
Yeah.
would like you very much.
Yeah, that would be bad, right?
So, I was convinced for a long time that this was the best solution for my world. And then I thought about it and the actual story mechanics of what I was trying to do. And my primary protagonist, who was not going to spend all his time at this prison ship, he was coming in to break somebody out, right? So he wasn't going to be there a long time. But he was good, the big climax was happening at this prison, the black moment of the story, things were going to get really bad. And unfortunately, I have created a protagonist that when things get really stressful for him and he gets really angry, he has this really nasty habit of blowing up the source of the magic. Um, and that wasn't the kind of body count I wanted to have in this particular story.
Yeah, that would be a big problem on a ship.
Yeah, that would have been everyone sort of going up in flames. So I had to scratch that idea, which I was disappointed because I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. You don't
Yeah,
want to kill everybody.
yeah, that would have blown up the whole ship. Not the solution I wanted. This isn't that dark of a story. So I had to scratch that, and I looked around a bit, and it ended up being prison ship, or not prison ships, gosh, prison islands were my best solution.
Oh, okay.
And luckily I live here by San Francisco, so I was able to go over by Alcatraz and poke around and check out, see what it was actually like being in that sort of, yes, Alcatraz. See what that felt like, what that kind of isolation could really do to you. And the cool thing about Alcatraz is they actually have a fantastic tour. If you're ever out by San Francisco, I highly recommend it. I definitely want to use prison ships in another story. That was just too cool. Especially when I found out we still have the prison barge in New York City. It was like, oh, that is a story. Yeah, it's a fantastic tour. It's really immersive. It's not like the whole gimmicky touristy thing. It's actually pretty historically interesting. And they do, I'm not sure if they do it anymore, but they used to let you like be locked in one of the cells for a little bit if you wanted, which of course I did because I want that experience for the story.
So you got locked in a cell?
Briefly. Yeah. They let me out again, so.
I should hope so.
Yes, method ready.
Wow. Okay, so did you use, what kind of resources did you use? Let me see if I can phrase this. What kind of resources did you use to plan out like the layout of the prison?
So I looked at a lot of blueprints for prisons. They're actually reasonably easy to come by, which I thought was a little strange, but they're out there on the internet. And I also, they're not very detailed, of course, but there are, you get to Google Earth and you've got aerial views too, which help quite a bit.
Right.
well, right, yeah, you gotta have, you know, little chance to plan something. So yeah, I looked at some blueprints. A lot of the old blueprints were available too, which was really helpful for older prisons and things like that. And looked at a lot of, honestly, a lot of them are laid out kind of like modern high schools.
Oh, wow. But you know what? That doesn't
Which was a little disconcerting for many reasons. But so, yeah. I mean, it's crowd control in all its forms. Yeah, but a lot of the sort of general theme of it was, you know, you've got a wing situation with some sort of large quad in the center where people, guards, of course, can keep an eye on people during their social time out under the sky, and yeah, everything was very sort of almost, how do I want to put this? It was almost like it was manufactured. That's not correct. Everything was modular. So that's the word I'm looking for. Everything was extremely modular, which I found interesting for ease of construction, for ease of you guards getting oriented with the layout, and for ease of blocking things off. You know, if you have a riot and you're able to isolate one block very quickly, well, then you've got a better chance of quelling that riot.
Yeah.
And I, of course, did have a riot, because why wouldn't I?
I'm asking her if she knows about the prison planning video game.
I did not. Prison Architect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I found out about that after I wrote the first draft of the book, unfortunately. Yeah, Prison Architect. I actually have it. Unfortunately, I haven't played it yet. It's one of those, it's on my Steam account, and I will get to it someday.
Yeah, my son
I have a lot of games on my Steam account that I plan on getting to someday.
And I mean, it's a little sinister, right?
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. A little bit, yeah. It's kind of a demented SimCity version. I don't know if any of you ever played. There's this old game in, like, I think the maybe late '90s, early 2000s, called Theme Hospital, where you had to sort of like keep contagion from spreading and keep, you know, that sort of thing. It reminds me a lot of that game, if you're familiar with it.
Okay.
So a little cartoony, but definitely dark.
So I'm going to assume the Prison Break works.
Yeah. Yeah, it does and it doesn't, as these things do. So I won't spoil the end of that particular book, but
no spoilers.
Yeah. Some people get away, some people don't. That's about all I'll say there.
That's good, though.
The Prison Break is in book 2.
Okay.
Book 3 is the fallout of that situation.
And so, is there going to be a 4th book?
Oh, so the books are set in sort of a quasi Victorian setting. It's kind of a mishmash of settings, because what happened with their culture is that they were technologically sort of on the brink of a mid to late Renaissance. So you've got, you know, your Leonardos are starting to pop up. They're starting to figure out leverage and things like that. And all of a sudden, they, in their explorations, come across this continent that has the magical source that they end up using to build airships with. So they go from the sort of early to mid-Renaissance, all of a sudden they have technology that can drive machines, but they have to invent the machines, and they have airships which can help them travel their extremely volatile seas. Which they couldn't do very effectively before, because of just the way I designed the planet. The seas are, the seas are very rough. So they go to this continent and they find Celium, which is the sort of gaseous element that they can control sort of telepathically via magic that they mine, and that is what gives their airships lift. It's very light, like helium, but it has magical properties as well, basically. So that sort of kicks them into this quasi, I don't know, it's not exactly an industrial revolution because they haven't invented the mechanics to go quite that far with their manufacturing and construction yet.
I mean, I think
they are, yeah,
revolution.
it's definitely a technological revolution. So they're a weird blend of sort of old ways of thinking being confronted with this new thing that they can do a great many things with it that they're just on the verge of figuring out.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, so it was designed as a trilogy. So the story does have a pretty solid ending with book 3.
You can have a lot of direction when you're exploring the new stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot that I can and have tried to do with exploring that particular resource.
Mm-hmm.
So book 3 is definitely the end of the trilogy. There's not a book 4 planned right now. There is a prequel novella that I'm going to be self-publishing just to sort of put my toe in that water and try that out late summer. And that goes, it's actually kind of an interesting thing with that novella because I wrote it, I don't know if any of you are familiar with P.G. Wodehouse.
Mm-hmm.
He sort of does the Jeeves and Wooster stories, which are a lot of fun. And I kind of, my primary protagonist is a sort of gentleman con man type. And his best friend is kind of emotional caretaker for him because he often thinks he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't. And so this novella I wrote was sort of because I love the P.G. Wodehouse so much, it was sort of a love letter to that type of story. And it ended up being, it's essentially a fantasy rom-com. And there's a lot of elements of the culture I was able to explore from that angle. And there's actually, there really is no magic in the novella. I mean, it exists, the world is functioning, it's obviously a part of their science and mechanics. You can see airships, but the novella doesn't have magic. It's all culture and relationships, which is fun for me. It's sort of a change of pace, which is really good.
So is this novella?
Yeah, I did look into a lot of those actually. Yeah, so the 19th century prisons that I looked into, I did look into Nike, and I looked into quite a few, and one of the elements that I found that was consistent across a lot of these prisons, and unfortunately a lot of prisons we still have today, was there was a lot of experimentation going on with the prisoners.
Yeah.
A lot of, I mean, these were people who were essentially stripped of their rights. So there was a lot of medical experimentation going on, primarily medical, a little psychological. And there are, well, okay, if you read the first book, you know there's a group of people called the White Coats in my world who go around experimenting on people who conduct magic to figure out how it works because they don't really know how it works and they want to figure out how to leverage that for the best ability. And those early era prisons definitely reminded me that, yeah, they would go to my prison and they would use that population. And yeah, that gets a bit dark.
Yeah, I would say.
So I took that inspiration from that particular experience. And they are there doing their experiments.
Wow.
And I think Juliet asked when the novella would be out. And that's a self-publishing experiment I'm going to do. I've commissioned the cover for it. So probably July or August, depending on when I get the artwork done.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing it. So let's see. I'm going to look up what we talked about earlier, because I was talking with Megan last night about what we wanted to talk about. Oh, right. So Megan wanted to talk about the magic system and how it relates to the culture. How do we do that?
Yeah, of course. Any specific questions, or you just want me to dive in?
I take it the magic system is a resource model. Magic equals water.
Yeah. So the magic system. Yeah. So in my fantasy stories, I like to sort of treat magic as a natural resource. Something I talk about quite a lot, actually. Yeah, magic is something that in any given society, if you come across something that can improve your quality of life in any way, you're going to try to attempt to control it in some way, to whether that be sort of like a dictatorship or a trading situation or even a diplomacy. Like there are governmental factors that come into play with anything as powerful as magic. And in this particular case, since it is something that can be mined out of the ground, it becomes a commodity. And the gas itself is inert until it is, yes, yeah.
So
it is
I'm remarking that magic
found on a land that they go to. It's tied to volcanic activity in a way. It gets the gas is sort of gets recycled in the Earth's crust and pushed towards the surface because of volcanic activity, and there's a feedback cycle there because it is an elevating gas. But they go to a place where their culture is originally from an area where the volcanoes are dormant. So when they go to a place where the volcanoes are active, they discover that, you know, this magic is here. We can use this. Certain people, for various reasons that become clear in book 3, have an affinity for it for some reason and can manipulate it in different ways. So you get this situation where you have people who can control. It's like if you had a silver mine, right? Yeah, I like that direction. So, so the sort of analogy is like if you have a silver mine, right? You can pull it out of the ground, but imagine then you only have a certain amount of people who are capable of making that work.
What do you mean? So,
sorry, someone posted a movie that was interesting. So you can pull silver out of the ground, but for the vast majority of people, they can't actually do anything with it. You have to have people who have sort of, yeah, like craftspeople, like incredibly talented craftspeople, and it's not something in this case you can learn. It's a native inherent ability that you can refine if you have it, but you have to have it from the get-go. So not only is your actual resource a commodity, but now the people who control that resource are a commodity.
and
that
makes sense.
Obviously becomes a problem from a human rights issue, and yeah, especially when it's a limited source of people. So they haven't yet. I was actually somebody asked if there's right. Yeah, it's so basically it's a matter of being able to do anything at all with it.
Because I believe it's controlled by telepathy.
Yeah, it's a telepathical connection, and the reasons why are absolutely explained in book 3. which, yeah, I had a lot of fun setting that up. I like to have some sort of, I mean, it is magic, but I like to have some sort of like biological reasons, even if they, I mean, it's magic, so it can be a little hand wavy, but since this is like the secondary world, I get to dive into how that actually works, which was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So you're not going to tell us anything about that biological explanation. Okay, so Patsy's saying that would be a power struggle because if we use magic are the people who want to control magic can be
so how can I put this without spoiling things?
You know what?
There's a character who eventually sees on your okay.
We can wave our hands and say, spoiler!
So eventually, spoiler alert, obviously, they come to realize that there's a character who ends up being able to see this particular molecule of cellium, which was the gas, at a microscopic level at a certain moment, and he can see it moving through people's bodies. And he realizes that there are some people whose blood-brain barrier works more effectively to filter it out than others, essentially. Okay. So those who have it pass through the blood-brain barrier, it enters their brain and interacts with their neurons in the same way any neurotransmitter would, and that is essentially their mental connection with the gas, and that's how they control it. Yeah, and once he sees that, he does something with it, but I'm not going to tell you that.
You don't have to tell us that. I'm glad you gave us a peek, though.
Yeah, it was kind of cool figuring out. I mean, I know how it worked, but then I had to sort of backtrack and figure out, like, why would they think it's working? You know, because they are at a level of science where they don't know what a blood-brain barrier is. You know, they don't know what these things are. So they start, they think, well, it's breeding, right? Because of course it is. And then, oh, well, maybe it's in the groundwater. And so they start, they have their own experiments to try and figure out how it works before they actually, this one person discovers the connection.
So I'm remembering that some people develop this ability late in life because of being around the gas.
Yeah, there's definitely an overload principle that can happen. And people tend to develop it early on if they're going to develop it at all, because it is, I think of it as sort of the permeableness, can't speak today, is a function of a recessive trait. So it does have a genetic component, but that can be worn down over time, because one of the things that the gas sort of does is you see hints of it in the world, and that if people who use it for a long period of time eventually develop something called bone wither, which looks a lot like osteoporosis. And it's because the cellium gets into the bloodstream, and it's very active, so it bonds with a lot of things, and it sort of bonds with calcium and removes it from the bone, but it can also overload that blood-brain barrier and make its way into the brain at a given point.
I bet that's not good.
Yeah. So generally, if you are sort of a rich merchant family, you don't want to have this cellium user in your bloodline. You wouldn't want your children to have that. There's actually there's a plot point with that in the first book, because when you develop this ability, to basically, it makes it so you can move stellium around and you can manipulate it and you can fly airships with it and all that kind of thing. But if you have this, then that is your job. Contractually, that is what you do. The government sort of, you are essentially an indentured servant at that point. You will mine stellium, you will pilot airships. There is no other choice for you in life. And if you are the sole heir of a rich merchant, yeah, basically. So if you are the sole heir of a rich merchant family, then your family just sort of fell apart because there's no one left to take on the reins.
Okay.
And that causes a lot of social upheaval. At the point in the world where my story is taking place, people are starting to push back against that. They're starting to try to find ways to hide stellium sensitivity. They're starting to consider a different form of government, let's say. And that definitely comes into play in book 3. There's a lot of governmental changes in that particular novel.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So the primary system of government is an empire called Wallachia. They're named for the islands that they come from, which are dormant volcanoes. They had decent sailing technology because they were a chain of islands. And in this world where the oceans are incredibly brutal, good sailing technology allowed them to spread further and faster than anybody else. So they hit the Scorched Continent first, which is where the magic can be found.
Okay.
And immediately realized the value of it, adapted their shipbuilding principles to airships, and started taking over that continent and anybody else who happened to get in their way. But they are on the Scorched Continent by necessary of distance, sort of a colonized nation. It looks a lot like early America governmentally, and that these are not necessarily states.
Who are they colonizing?
But they're small city-states. And there were people who were there before they got there. They were called the Qatari, and they had a much calmer relationship, I should say, with stellium. They embraced it. It was a part of their culture. They did not. If you were a stellium sensitive, you were free to choose what you wanted to do with your life. You weren't pressed into service. But they were very small as a society by nature of sort of their geological location. I mean, the Scorched Continent is as it is named. It is badlands. It is desert. It is not a fun place to live, and that's a hard place to build civilization. So the Valathians show up. They roll over the native population, and that, of course, becomes plot points throughout the 3 books. There's definitely an agent of that civilization, the previous civilization, throughout all 3 books, actually. She's present. And so they take over, they set up these city-states, and eventually, after a couple generations, you've got people who don't identify as Walathian anymore. They identify as being part of the Scorched Continent, where they were born, sort of results of some early interbreeding between the previous civilization and the imperial civilization. And they no longer have that fervent, proud connection with their homeland. They've never been there. They've never seen it. Their only connection with those people are, they're big government officials who show up on fancy ships every so often and demand taxes, and so that's they're not exactly loyal to that. Yeah, and after a while, though they are reliant. Yes, exactly. Like it's very much like early America. And after a while, they start to think, well, we're kind of reliant on them for supplies in some way, because these are cities that are quite large in a very hostile environment. But we have other methods of doing that because we've invented new technology due to the stellium, and they start to push back. And that's a big political through point throughout all 3 books.
Yeah.
It actually starts with one of the largest city-states in the first book is being taken over by a commodore of the original empire who left. She's starting to, in her mind, she's the bad guy. But in her mind, she's starting to unite the Scorched Continent against the early Empire and make it its own thing.
I'm forgetting her name, but it's in here somewhere. Never mind. It's all good. This is really fun. Okay, so we're kind of getting towards the end of the hour. I know this has been short, but this is, I think it's working pretty well. We're pretty much getting close to the end.
I hope I'm not missing anything. Remind me if I miss a question.
People who have other questions, Che and Morgan, do you guys have questions?
No questions. It's on my list of things to read now.
Sorry, I remember you asked that earlier if it was recyclable. Actually, so it is finite. They will eventually get it all out of the earth. It will take a long time to do that. I'm actually have vague ideas for like projecting this society into the far future and what that might look like. Because like oil, they will eventually run out of it. They'll mine it all up out of the ground. And unfortunately, that means a lot of it is going up into the atmosphere. And because gases rise, that's where it goes when it gets away. So they're actually global cooling. It'll be occlusive.
It's going to cause global cooling.
So not only will they lose their resource, their planet will be getting colder. And because the Celium was a large part of what helped drive sort of the tectonic activity. So remember, it is often found by active volcanoes. Tectonic activity will slow down. And once you have land masses aren't renewing, oceans start to die off, things get a little dire in this particular future. And no, wait, all their technology is based on a product they no longer have access to. So.
Is there a natural Celium cycle?
There is. Yeah. They are very much in trouble in the far future. Yeah, there is a cycle. Yeah, there will be sort of a technology rush when this happens, where they're all trying to replace what they realize they're losing. Very similar to what's happening today, honestly.
Oh,
they'll try to synthesize it. It won't work. Because I'm not that nice. And, they're going to have a lot of problems. Actually, I have some ideas I would love to do someday for like, what would it look like when this world tried to attempt space flight?
Wow.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I've got a couple other projects I'm working on with my agent right now, but it's definitely on my list of things to do is far future Scorched Continent. What does that look like? Yeah, I've been thinking about it.
I hope it's not our future. That'd be very cool. Okay, I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you guys. This was a lot of fun. I'm sorry I can't hear you.
Oh gosh. I mean, it must have been so frustrating.
Thank you.
But she did really great.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It's worked before. So
It worked before. Next time we'll have a sound check.
Good. I hope I didn't miss anything. Trying to keep it all in line.
You did great.
Yeah. I think I need a new microphone.
Me too.
Yeah. Or speakers.
I'm gonna be improving my tech here pretty soon. Actually,
yeah,
I should mention
probably my speakers. They were working okay, but I don't know. I switched to my laptop and that didn't work either. So I think it might be my webcam has like a speaker microphone combo thing. Oh, awesome.
So I'm going to actually be hosting a live session of Dive into World Building at Baycon convention. So
that would be fantastic. Yeah.
I'm working on the
I'd
technical
love to.
right
Yeah.
now.
Baycon's late May, right?
Yeah, it's in Memorial Day.
Okay.
Testing my typing speed. I don't know. If I don't know if we're going to do a topic, author, hard to say. But suggestions are welcome. So, yeah, definitely. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to wrap this up right now, and I think.
Do we know what the theme of Baycon is? That might be a good place to look.
Yes. It's dystopias and utopias. That would be perfect. That would be perfect.
Oh.
Let's totally do
that would be good. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna say thank you for being here, Megan. And we're gonna.
Thank you guys. This was fun.
All right.
A lot of fun.